So this program, you know about, is about the RACE Commission on racial and structural equity. I call this report as the labor of love, and I think our speakers will explain to you how this is a really a community-wise and a labor of love. So about the report, if we see, we will have the details soon, but it's about, we could not bring everybody who was commissioners on the report. There were 9 groups. We tried to get some. So we have about, we have the 2 co-chairs. I think you know both of them, Mayor Bill Johnson and Arlene Santiago, who are the 2 co-chairs. I humbly was part of the 3rd one, but the 2 co-chairs are with us, who will speak to us. Bill Johnson will speak to us about the background. Arlene will go further on some significant points on the report. And then we have the commissioners. At least we got some important commissioners from the 3 groups. Dr. Eric Kane, who was a commissioner on the mental health and addiction services, who has a long experience in the mental health area also. He will be with us to speak on significant points on the mental health and addiction services. And then we have with us Wayne Harris, and he has been a policeman by himself, deputy police chief, and he was part of the policing group, which is another important area. He will talk about it. And then Karen Elam is with us. She was part of the human and social services group. So all this area, the 9 groups, and especially some of the commissioners which are with us, will speak about some of the significant points along with the 2 co-chairs. But before we bring the 2 co-chairs, before we start with the RACE Commission program, at the end, when the QA ends, we will have the representatives from the Monroe County and City of Rochester. I believe Dr. Lucas is with us from the Monroe County, and Dr. Archie from the city, from Rochester City, as representative from there. They will speak of what is happening in the county and the city after the QA at the end of the program. So that is also very important, how the commission report is taken seriously and how the work is going on the commission report. So let's start with our program, but before we invite the speakers to say a few words, each one has been given time and they will speak within that time. Before that, I want to invite Bernard Grizzard. You may be seeing Rochester Interfaith Alive, which is RENA, we call it. You may not know about it. I think you know about the Hickey Center and the Triple IT chair, which I hold at Nazareth College, which we do a lot of programs like that. But this program is partially sponsored by RENA also. So Bernard Grizzard, you have 2 minutes to give us a brief review of what is RENA.
Thank you, Dr. Shafiq. So RENA, as you know, Rochester has a long history of interfaith and a very rich history in so many ways through the years. The different communities of the Rochester area, the greater Rochester, met and developed different plans, so really to strengthen our communities. So a few years ago, several leaders from our religious communities in Rochester met and decided to create a network, the Rochester Interfaith Network Alive, which would allow us to work together and collaborate together on several levels. A first level was to base on what we believe and our different beliefs and traditions. We wanted to have a special work around educations and dialogue. So through this, different opportunities to learn from each other, and to initiate programs which will help us to build one community. So as we stand together as one community, which is part of our mission. Another pillar, which we decided at the time, was we have a diversity of spiritualities and diverse rituals. And on that level, we thought we could, on a regular basis or for particular event, to be able to express our spirituality and also to pray together and to ritualize. So for example, when a few years ago, when the Jewish community was really hurt in Pittsburgh, and there was all the shootings, and so we had a large gathering of all our different religious groups to meet and pray together and strengthen each other through our spirituality and what we believe. And the third pillar of who we are as RENA, as a network, is a commitment to action and services. And so we are here also to serve together our broader community. And with a deep belief that as we meet and gather together for a common purpose, it's really bring richness and strengthens our community at large. So that's pretty much what RENA is about. Many thanks to Dr. Shafiq for being one of the key pillars and bringing people together also on a regular basis for this. So I want to thank all of you who joined today for this presentations on the special report on these commissions. I want to welcome you and thank you for be willing to be part of our network so we all together can strengthen our community. So thank you, Dr. Shafiq, and thank you to all of you.
Thank you, Bernard. Now, Mayor Bill Johnson, the floor is yours to talk about the background of the RASE Commission report.
Good afternoon, Dr. Shafiq, and to all who have gathered. Thank you for this opportunity. One of the things that we insisted on in terms of participating in this, when we saw the significant response, is to ensure that there would be ample time to take as many questions as possible. So we want to limit our overview, and I'm going to set the tone for that, hopefully within the next 1.5 minutes. When this commission was created, it was done in the backdrop of a distant event. Like most of the country, we were deeply offended by the execution style death of George Floyd in Minneapolis. And then the commission was appointed, and little did we know that we had a George Floyd situation of our own here, so that when the word of Mr. Prude's death became public, the commission had a greater sense of urgency. And so what you have seen, what you will see, and my colleagues on the commission will discuss in more detail, is how we attempted to address this question of ridding the community of structural inequities. And this is a rather difficult concept for some people to grasp, because it is so baked into our system that people hardly recognize it when they see it. And people who have been privileged by this system of an inequitable distribution of power and resources sometimes balk at the notion that they must give up some of it. We hope that through these series of conversations and dialogue that's going on in Rochester after this report has been released, and with the subsequent accountability measures that are going to come and will be discussed from the mayor and the county executive, that Rochester will move to become a much more inclusive, a much less exclusive in terms of excluding people from all of the rights and privileges of citizenship that have so long been denied and have fallen really disproportionately on the shoulders of people of color. So that is what this report in a nutshell is all about. Now, people sometimes get intimidated when they hear that it is 282 pages long. And I always tell them that they can read a certain part of this report, they can read up to page 69, and they will have a clear understanding of not only how the commission went about its work, what our findings were, but even an understanding of specific remedies to address many of these problems. I've got to say, this is not the end-all report. It does not include everything. And people would be, in my mind, they would be remiss if they focused on that. What I've heard people say, and some of the people I'm looking at one person's face in particular, who was in another session a week ago, said, seize this moment. Let's deal with what is in front of us. And then we can move and we can be more inclusive in terms of bringing in other things. I see you smiling, Dr. Wilkinson, and you were the one that I was referring to. And so that is what this is about. And you will hear that this report was never designed to be a research document, never designed to be something that could be taught in classes at our local universities. It is an action document, and there are some easy actions that can be moved immediately and without a lot of resources necessary to make them happen. There are some which are much more challenging, but I think once we get the experience under our belt that these things can be done, those difficult ones will become less difficult and the record of accomplishment will be greater. So I want to sort of leave it there, turn it over to my colleague, Arlene Santiago, and the other co-facilitators who can put meat on those bones.
Thanks, Bill. And thank you again to Rena, to Nazareth College and the Hickey Center for organizing this event, for inviting us to participate in this discussion, and for allowing us the opportunity to engage with you on what we believe to be some very valuable work that as a group we worked on for the last 6 to 7 months at least. And we recognize, as Bill just said, that this is really the beginning. That was, although for us it may have been the ending of some substantive work, it's really the beginning of the path of where we can move things forward. Today, we'd like to begin by taking a couple of minutes to just highlight certain aspects of the report and the work of the commission. So hopefully by now, most of you have had the opportunity to at least look through the report. I'll get us started once again by just providing a quick overview of the commission and the report. As you all know, it was created by Mayor Warren and County Executive Bello last June. As Bill said, the commission was created shortly after the nation witnessed through video the killing of George Floyd. The commission itself was focused on 2 primary deliverables. The first being the identification of institutional and structural racism and inequities that fell within areas that are under the purview of our city and our county government. And the second category was identifying or developing recommendations via policies, laws, regulations, or practices that could bring an end to those systemic and structural practices. As Bill said, when you're dealing with systemic and structural racism, the roots are deep and it takes a lot of work and time to change that. So we really do feel that the report itself brings forward very good, legitimate issues and recommendations that can put us on that path with the right dedication and right amount of work to really change the history of our country. Although there's been a lot of media coverage on issues relating to policing and mental health, we believe that all of the 9 areas covered in the report are crucial to examine as you look at at structural and systemic racism. Looking at one aspect alone will not result in systemic and structural change, as there are lots of points of intersection between the various systems that exist and their impacts on Black and Brown members of our community. So although you will hear from 3 of our commissioners today, we really do encourage each of us to remember that neither the issues or the solutions that we are talking about live in a silo, right? So we need to look across multiple areas and disciplines to come forward with effective systemic change. As many of you know, the commission was made up of the 3 chairs, and I had the honor of being one of those chairs and working with 2 esteemed colleagues, 21 commissioners, 9 working groups led by 2 or 3 commissioners each, and well over 150 working group members that consistently participated in the process. The truth is that we had more than 150, but we knew that there was at least 150 active participants on the call. In addition to that, we had hundreds of other community members who participated in multiple community engagement activities and provided the very valuable input that helped the working groups and commissioners articulate and prioritize the recommendations that appear in the report. And I emphasize that point because we really do believe that this is a community report, just as Bill articulated a few minutes ago. In terms of the report itself, I completely agree with Bill's statements that when people see 200 or close to 300 pages, 282 pages, it may seem overwhelming, but breaking it up into the subsections as he describes is crucial. What I say is, if you're really short in time and only have a little bit of time to give us with respect to the report, start with pages 57 to 66. There you'll find the approximately 50 recommendations which reflect the working group's prioritized recommendations. They are organized under 5 broad headings or categories because those are the themes that came out of the work that was done. If you have a little bit more time, and we're hopeful that many of you do, then go ahead and look at pages 31 to 56. Once again, you'll see the commission findings. Those are organized under cross-cutting themes, which once again emphasizes the fact that these issues are not something that can be resolved in any one silo. It really does require collaboration and the effort of our entire community to bring these changes forward. I know I'm close to my end of time, so I'm going to be wrapping it up. As you will hear from the fellow commissioners, as well as from the representatives of the city and the county, there's a lot of passion around the issues addressed in the report. We truly need the support of our community and engagement of each of you to move this work forward and to bring the type of change that we so desperately need into our community. So thank you again for the engagement. I am hopeful that this is just the first of many to come.
Thank you, Arlene Santiago. Just one comment is the 2 co-chairs said, this report is about the whole human body. Actually, it may be hard for you to hear me in this way. I believe the whole human body is bleeding. The pain is has been reached to all the organs. This has been centuries old pain, happened through slavery and then post-slavery period. I would like you to read The Color of Law, the Jim Crow, the new Jim Crow, Running for Freedom, or even Cohn's book on Martin and Malton. There will be tears. It has been established in such a way. It's not about policing. It's not about criminal justice. It's not about housing. It's everywhere, employment, poverty, businesses. It's been, so that's why it was the co-chairs along with the people from the staff, from county and the city staff, work together with these 9 groups, not just to talk about one, but the whole body, how the steps could be taken. So we have with us Dr. Kane on a very important, commissioner in a very important group, Mental Health and Addiction Services.
Good afternoon. And I'm Eric Kane. If I haven't met you or you haven't met me, I've lived in Monroe County since 1978 and worked at the Department of Psychiatry at the UR Medical Center and led the Department of Psychiatry from 1993 through 2017. and have I think, a fair overview of the services and availability and problems we have. Let me try to put our task force into some perspective. Number one, we were going to pay a lot of attention to emergency responses before we learned about Daniel Prude, and that the emergency response for mental health was going to be very important. In the context of his very sad death, the county and the city both set up different efforts. And so what we decided to do was to back up, to try to be coordinated with them, but also not to get in their way. Clearly, some people from the county were part of our overall work group, and we had a number of comments about that, and I'll come back to that. But we put ourselves at a more systems level than just the emergency response level. The second thing to know in thinking about this, because our charge was to change or look at laws, policies, and practices that the city and county could change. Overall, the city and county provide very, very, very few, I can't say how few enough, mental health or addiction services. This is not their purview. These are provided by large health systems, our large, UR Medicine, Rochester Regional, large agencies like Catholic Family, Mental Health Association. And so the authority that we might have over these agencies is limited largely to moral authority, to persuasion, and to community influence. And the third thing to realize as a background is that all of those services are tied to fee-for-service, including Medicaid. So for mental health services or addiction services, there are two things. You have to have a diagnosis, a diagnosable disorder, and a treatment code in order to make a bill. So this really precludes preventative services in the way these systems are set up. And this is a fundamental failing. Now, it's not something that we can change at the city or the county level, but it's certainly something that's central to our thinking. So we made a series of recommendations. You can look at, I'll make an advertisement here. Page 184 is the best place for you to begin to read the report. Don't listen to what anyone else said. It's all mental health. No, I'm teasing. I just want to advertise our report and make sure that you know that it begins on page 184. The first thing that we note, of course, is that there are just a tremendous lack of resources for Black and Brown, Spanish-speaking, and other communities which have gotten the short end of the stick and have been, disproportionately disadvantaged. And there are very few people in communities. And while there are a lot of resources, relatively speaking, in Monroe County, they're not so much in the city, but there are some in the city. But while there are a lot of resources, they're not very accessible. In fact, they're not accessible to a lot of people, even when you have good insurance and good connections. But they're especially not accessible to folks who live in areas that were redlined and disadvantaged structurally. So the first recommendation we make is really to have what we call behavioral health advocates, people from communities, trained, certified, with some education, but clearly some sort of not-for-profit organization, not owned by the health systems, not on fee-for-service, who serve as community advocates, sort of a piece of social worker, a piece of navigator, a connector, certainly with strong connections to health systems, but able to begin to bring a prevention, early intervention message to communities that have not been able to get access to this. It's essential that each of these providers, the big providers, be held accountable for having culturally attuned, informed, linguistically capable people in order to serve the diverse communities that we have here. It's unacceptable for them to be not-for-profit organizations and not be able to serve our communities in the way that need to serve them. And they need to be held accountable for this, bar none. And thirdly, mindful of my time, I'm only going to stick to 3, is alignment. We are extremely concerned, and I can't underscore this enough, and I've challenged the county exec and the mayor, that the new efforts to bring mental health to crisis intervention to the streets are not going to be aligned. We've got a county system developing, we've got a city system developing. they're not coordinated very well at this point. They talk about being coordinated, but on the other hand, we also have crisis services through Strong Hospital and crisis services through Rochester General and Unity. And these all need to be brought together. And the County Office of Mental Health needs to be a coordinator and have the authority vested in them to make sure that there's one system and not 4 systems. Right now, there's no mental health system in this community. There are pieces. And anybody who uses the word mental health system is using a misnomer. I would argue that we even don't have health systems because there's so many people left in gaps. And it's going to be critical in the mental health arena to have a major inventory of all services. The County Office of Mental Health, inspired by RASE, is already developing this, and that our behavioral health advocates and other community navigators know how to list these systems, list these sites, get access to them, and be able to be, how should I say, welcome at the front door as opposed to feeling barriers at the front door. I'll stop here. I'm trying to keep short, sweet. One of my colleagues tells me I always should be bright, be brief, and be gone. So I'll stick to the 3 Bs and stop at this point.
Thank you very much, Dr. Eric Kane. Thanks a lot. And now we have Wayne Harris with us from the policing group. He himself have a lot of experience how the police department works. Wayne Harris.
So good afternoon, everyone. I'm encouraged to see so many familiar faces and some faces that I don't know, but I think the fact that we have over 100 people on this call, Reverend Hargrave, I see you, sir. I always have to acknowledge you independently and very specially. So I appreciate my friend being here. But as I was saying, I'm encouraged that we have so many people on the call today because the topic of discussion is so relevant to what's occurring, not only nationally, but absolutely here in Rochester. So as Dr. Shafiq said, my name is Wayne Harris. I spent 30 years with the Rochester Police Department, retiring as a Deputy Chief of Police. Since my retirement, I've continued to work from the outside looking in on the law enforcement industry. I'm the current board chair for the Law Enforcement Action Partnership, which is a global organization designed for the improvement of policing here and across the board. So, you know, as Mayor Johnson indicated, this report came about at a time when we were facing yet another instance of the death of an African-American at the hands of policing. And as we've all been watching the trial of Derek Chauvin for the past week and a half now, you know, it's apparent that there are some very serious issues in policing that need to be addressed. And, you know, through the process of our report here, of course, Daniel Prude came to light, and we had to recognize that our community was not immune to the type of situation that we were seeing being played out across the country. So when I stepped into my role as co-chair of the police working group, we sat down with about 18, 19 other individuals. And John, I saw that you were on this call, so I appreciate you being here today too. And we, as a group, collectively decided that the recommendations that we were going to put forward, and we set this tone from the very beginning, the recommendations that we were setting forward were going to be actionable. They were going to be something that could be accomplished that would have immediate impact on the way policing was done here in the Rochester area. And we focused on, we eventually narrowed it down to about 4, but we focused on a number of focus areas that we thought were most important. And the 4 that those were eventually trickled down to were hiring practices, training, how our men and women in policing are trained here, operational practices, and also community engagement. We decided on those 4 areas because recognizing that the way we hire individuals and the process that they have to go through in order to serve us as police officers in our area can fundamentally be changed. Because even at that level of employment, the actual hiring practice, there were exclusions that were being made. There was subjectivity to the training process, and the background investigation, and the psychological testings that were disproportionately impacting people of color and subsequently keeping them out of the ranks of law enforcement here. We listened to the community, and we heard the community say that they felt that the men and women that serve as police officers should be more reflective of the community of Rochester and the county of Monroe. And we thought the one way that we could impact that would be to look at how we were bringing men and women into policing in the first place. From there, we began to look at training, and we started looking at the basic police officers course that is mandated by the Division of Criminal Justice Services. It's a state agency, and the training curriculum that every man and woman has to go through in order to serve as a police officer in this area. And we found that there were some very significant disparities in the way our officers were being taught. A very good example is that the state only mandates 5 hours of cultural diversity training for anyone serving as a police officer in this area. We found that was insufficient, and the recommendations that we put forward through the RASE report was to say to the state of New York, we need to do better in teaching our men and women about the history of the areas that they're working with, about the different cultures of the people that they're going to be working with, so that they're better prepared to come from the academy and properly serve the men and women and the community members here. From there, we moved on to operational practices. And we got into conversations like stop and frisk and traffic stops, and the technology that we're using, and the way we actually stand when we're face to face with another individual, recognizing that an individual's body language can set the tone of how that interaction is going to occur. So we began to develop recommendations that spoke to the way we were doing business in policing here in Rochester. And then finally, we spoke to community engagement and recognized, as Robert Peel said in the 1800s, that law enforcement, police gain their legitimacy, they gain their authority to serve the community based on the public. In other words, the public says, yes, you can be a police officer here. The public says, yes, I want you to come in and help with those quality of life issues that are so mutually impactful to all. We saw that we had begun to get away from that and decided that if we were going to write recommendations, we were going to write recommendations that dealt with how we can get back and connect with the community. So we came up with a number of different recommendations, and I'm going to push back on Dr. Kane here. I know he said 187 was the page to go to. I'm going to recommend you go to page 212, which begins the outline of the recommendations that came from the police working group. I'll give you an example very briefly because I know my time is up also, but one of the things that we looked at with regard to hiring practices here in Rochester was the federal consent decree that the city of Rochester has been under since 1975. The work on it began in 1974, but it was actually signed in 1975, which mandated that the Rochester Police Department would at least reach the level of 25% minority representation within its ranks. Unfortunately, we've only ever gotten close to that number, while the minority population in the city of Rochester has increased to well over 50%. So subsequent to that, the federal consent decree is never going to allow the Rochester Police Department to accurately reflect the community that it serves. So the recommendation that we put forward was that we re-examine the consent decree and perhaps change the language in there so that it mandates that the Rochester Police Department always reflect the racial and economic demographics here in the city. So we tried to put as much thought into this as we could. We engaged with police officers in our conversation. We engaged with community members in our conversations. We sat down with some faith-based leaders. So I'm so glad that you're all here today. And what we tried to put forward was something as comprehensive as we possibly could. And I'm going to end there. Again, I thank you all for being here today, and I look forward to your questions as we move into the question and answer segment.
Dr. Shafiq, should I go ahead and jump in?
Yeah. Thank you very much. Yeah. Just 1 second, Carolina. We have the next group presentation. You may know that this is a very, the Human and Social Services group is a very important group. How it caters to the community, actually, to our children, to our seniors, to others. Karen Elam is well known in the community, engaged and working in the community for quite a while in Rochester, and has a deep sense of what needs to be done. Karen Elam, about your group on Human and Social Services.
Great. Thank you, Dr. Shafiq. I didn't mean to jump over you. So I just want to start by saying how honored I was to have been able to engage with this commission, and how much I appreciate all of the effort that the 3 co-chairs and the 21 commissioners, the volunteers, the group members that joined with us put into this. It truly was, I think somebody before said, a labor of love. So I will be very brief as well, although, you know, Human and Social Services, what we realized, Mitch Gruber, Bruce Popper, and I being the 3 commissioners, was that Human and Social Services is this big and could cover a lot of different areas. And so pretty quickly what we did with the community is establish where we could zero in to begin to do some work in this area. And so the 4 key issues that emerged in our conversations with community members were: 1, disproportionality in child welfare. So we found that African American children in the Monroe County Human Services system are disproportionately affected in terms of out-of-home or foster care placements by a significant margin. The second area was eligibility for financial assistance. Monroe County has disproportionately high rates of sanctions for non-compliance. And that leads to significant reductions in financial support for those who most need it. The third area was older adults. What we found is that older adults, in particular BIPOC or Black, Indigenous, and people of color, face a range of issues from disproportionate and increasing rates of poverty, particularly in the city, to challenges affording healthcare, food, quality housing, transportation, and including adapting to new and expensive technologies, which obviously during a pandemic is particularly acute as an issue. And then the fourth issue is lack of cultural competency. And what we found is that there are racially inequitable client outcomes that result from policy, from administration, practice, and service delivery centered on cultural competency. So the 4 areas, let me go back again and just highlight the recommendations that our group came up with. And again, since my 2 co-commissioners said you have to read their sections, I'll say you have to read ours too, starting on page 146. So in child welfare, the recommendation is that the Monroe County Department of Human Services develop a strategic plan for an equitable case practice, consistent criteria, including one of the texts discussed was blind removal hearings. And in addition, and one thing I should mention is cultural competence. When I get to that, really, as I think one of the speakers previously said, really was cross-cutting. And so in many areas, mental health and addiction services, policing, education, you know, cultural competence, for sure is an area that requires a focus, a concerted focus. And in this as well, that the Department of Human Services should look to incorporate culturally responsive engagement strategies, examining internal policies, et cetera. The second issue that I mentioned, the eligibility for financial assistance, and Monroe County having the highest sanction when compared to similarly sized urban centers. The recommendation is straight up, sanctions should be a last resort, not a first step toward compliance. And so needing to look at and examine our employment policies vis-a-vis public assistance, substance abuse, et cetera, and reimagining a process where somebody is sanctioned and then conciliated in order to be able to create a system that uses those sanctions as an absolute last resort. The older adults, as I said, increasingly rates of elder poverty, are exploding, and particularly in the city of Rochester. And so recommendations include supporting and investing in livable communities for older adults, which is an initiative that Monroe County is undertaking, establishing a navigator training program, working with frontline workers, and upgrading senior centers. One of the things that the group discovered in their research and outreach to the community is the difference between the resourcing of senior centers in the city versus in our suburban areas. The difference, primary difference being that in many cases, suburban communities give additional funds to senior centers. And so the how can those be upgraded in the city to serve predominantly, again, Black, Indigenous, and people of color? And then the last, as I said, cultural competence. Really, it needs to be core to our human and social services in order to address racial inequity. And to be successful, one of the things I headed this particular smaller, we broke into our working groups. What I heard from those that I interviewed and talked with is that it needs to be at all levels, from frontline staff to county and city leaders to legislators. So our recommendations were that there be a county and city cultural competence plan with designated budget resources, so that there are policies and procedures, practices that reduce racial, ethnic, cultural, linguistic disparities, including in that training and education, monitoring, evaluation, outreach, et cetera. The second recommendation was ensuring the success of these cultural competence efforts through staffing and contractor supports. And one of the things I want to highlight is that the city has a cultural competence officer in Dr. Cephas Archie, and the county has just recently hired someone in that role as well. That was one of our recommendations, that there be a designated person, and then cultural competence managers at the next levels as well. And then finally, that there be a cultural competence advisory committee that is made up of those receiving services of clients and family members, county and city management staff, and frontline staff, community-based providers, faith-based organizations, and other interested parties. And with that, I hope I did not go over my 5 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Karen Ilam, for your presentation. So we are going to open it for Q&A. We have a good time to have a good discussion. The chat room is open for your questions, and our Hickey Center people, Patricia and Julie, and I believe Kamal is there to pick up your questions from the chat room and share it with the speakers to elaborate further on your questions.
This is, Dr. Peters, what we hope will be inspired by this report. I've spoken to a number of people who read the report, and they began to talk about creative approaches that can be brought to bear. One of the biggest issues that we face as a community is the concentration of all of this housing within the city limits, and whether suburban communities can take their fair share of low-income and moderate-income housing. There is a resistance, and it really hides behind zoning laws. So you will see a discussion there. You'll see a recommendation that there needs to be a discussion. But these are autonomous governments who did not authorize this report. I don't see that as a barrier. I see that as an opportunity to really further this discussion that many of you, including you and your groups, have had for a number of years. So I see it as an opportunity, and we need to really bring people into this discussion, bring them in to really talk about ways we can really work around all of the obstacles and barriers that have been put in place that prevent, the expansion of opportunities, not just in terms of numbers, but in terms of location. This is a critical factor, and I believe that the time is right for that to begin. The RASE doesn't have any authority. The mayor and the county executive have the authority. The private sector has the authority. What you will hear from Dr. Lucas and/or Dr. Archie is a discussion of this implementation process. I've spoken to the mayor. The whole commission met with the mayor and the county executive to make it clear that the implementation phase was going to be the most important phase of this work. And so they are preparing us they're working under a deadline to report publicly by the end of this month, April 30th, what those implementation strategies will be. And it goes beyond just simple things. For example, clearly there has to be a body of people empowered to oversee the implementation of this work. They will be empowered, just as the mayor and the county executive empowered the RASE Commission. But we recognize immediately some of the powers we didn't have. We couldn't compel anybody to come to testify, to meet with us, to discuss it. We had no subpoena power. We had no way to force anybody into the conversation. I'm hoping that this next phase, that group will be empowered to hold all of the key parties responsible for their end of the action. We'll wait to see how they roll this out within the next 3 weeks.
Absolutely. So if you look in the report itself, we have at least some broad categories of things and activities that we felt would be needed with respect to implementation and next steps. Obviously, as we just said, as Bill Johnson said a few minutes ago, really, we are looking to the county and the city in terms of some of the actions that they'll be taking in the short term. And I know that we have both Dr. Archie and Dr. Cephas on the webinar. So hopefully they'll be able to tell us with some specificity as to the next steps that the city and the county are taking.
And since we, thank you, Arlene, since we keep citing pages 67 and 68, and specifically page 68 really addresses this point. One of it is a time frame, that there need to be regular reporting to the community. And my suggestion would be no later than 6 months, that there needs to be a public accounting of exactly what steps have been taken, what progress has been made, what actions have been implemented, and that this happens consistently. And it doesn't matter who the mayor or who the county executive is. This is now a community-owned process. The reason we put this report out publicly the same day we released it to the mayor and the county executive, well, they had it a couple of days in advance, but we wanted this to be a publicly owned document. So if you want to know what my role would be, let me say, and I say this, I'm just being half facetious. I told the mayor I didn't want to be on the implementation committee. I want to be on the agitation committee. The committee that's asking every night, what's going on? What's happening? Why is it taking so long? That's the committee I want to be on, the agitation committee. I'll even chair it or co-chair it with anybody else who wants to be on it.
Thank you for that question. Yes, it was one of the things we recognized, and it speaks to the hiring and the training that we were talking about, or that I mentioned about a little bit earlier. One of the things that we recognized was that there was a strong deficiency in the level of information that passes from police to the citizens and from the citizens to the police. And that if we did not prepare our men and women to serve as police officers in this area, and by that I mean if we're not telling them about the redlining and the way that neighborhoods developed in the city of Rochester, if we're not talking about some of the socioeconomic concerns that the city of Rochester has always faced, if we're not talking about the fact that years ago, a person of color couldn't go to Kodak and get the kind of job that a white person could get, and be able to raise a family and send their kids to school. If we're not talking about the riots that occurred back in 1964 and preparing these men and women to go into these neighborhoods that are still impacted by all of these things, then we were failing them, and we were failing ourselves because we were inadequately preparing anyone to go in and serve as police officers. So when we started to look at hiring and when we started to look at training, and we recognized that not only does the state not mandate significant and I guess worthy cultural competency training, we wanted to make recommendation that would call into question that particular point of view. Now, the state mandates that, as I said, 5 hours of cultural competency training be delivered. Before I retired, I actually taught implicit bias to the entire Rochester Police Department, and that's a 4-hour program, which leaves, in my estimation, 1 hour further of cultural competency training for any police officer going through the academy. Also, post-training from the academy is inadequate because it also doesn't address cultural competency. So the recommendation that we made was that we begin to not only speak about implicit bias, but we also begin to speak about explicit bias. We also begin to take a look at procedural justice and weave that into not only the academy experience, but also the post-academy experience. We're also writing in, or wrote in, that we recommended that it be a continual kind of thing, that we increase dramatically how we're training or what we're teaching the men and women that are going to come out here. We recommended that we teach them about the history of Rochester. We recommended that we teach them specifically about the history of policing in America, so that as they're coming out to serve us, they're aware of all the different factors that are going to come into play on each and every encounter that they have out there. So as Mayor Johnson has said, as the other co-facilitators have said, this is a work in progress. This is us saying, we are recognizing this as a deficiency and we think you need to change this. Now, it's going to be up to the city and the county to go to the state of New York, the Division of Criminal Justice Services, and say that we find 5 hours of cultural competency training inadequate for the men and women that are going to serve us as police officers. Now, in that regard, the community can assist, because the community can back County Executive Bello and back Mayor Warren to say, yep, we actually do want our men and women of the police departments to be more culturally competent in their dealings with Monroe County and the city of Rochester citizens. So yes, we did address that significantly.
Again, I think we need to view this in phases. The work we did, we call phase 1. We reported to our principals. We gave them a charge. They're going to report back. Phase 2 will really be the critical phase of implementation. And we recommend that many people who were involved in this process at the beginning stay involved in various roles, but that new people be brought into this process, but only if they're committed to pushing this forward. You know, there's a tendency for new people to come in and want to go back and make course corrections. Oh, you didn't do this, you added this. We really need to show progress, and we need to show it as quickly as we can. And that's why I say within 3 to 6 months, there are some easy things that this community can undertake. Now, I believe your question went a little further, and I want to just take a second to comment on it. Not only the city and the county resources, but remember, the United Way just got a $20 million grant to use as it sees fit. I just spoke to someone this morning at the United Way who was getting ready to meet on this to say, you can't keep this internal. This is a lot of money. We need to really bring the full community in a discussion about what are the most effective ways to spend this money, not just to spend it, but to leverage it, to invest it in serious community needs, and to leverage that money so that it's not just 20 million, it could be 50 million, it could be 100 million if you bring in money from other resources. So there's a lot of opportunity. I'm very encouraged. There's a lot of opportunity out there, and it's not going to be a handful of people who are making these decisions. It's going to be a lot of people, and you need to find out the place where you feel you can be the most effective, and put your voice in that conversation and say to the mayor, because look, as Arlene just said, there are 50 specific recommendations. If you look at that and you plotted that out, that's a huge number of recommendations. okay? And so there is opportunity for not only everybody on this call, but thousands and thousands of people in this community to bring their collective might to work to get something done. That's the thing I'm agitating for, getting something done. I've seen too many of these reports that have all highfalutin language, and everybody gets all worked up about it. And then about 6 months later, they've forgotten all about it. It goes on the shelf and nobody talks about it again. I know that Dr. Shafiq, like he's doing today, Arlene, through all of her involvement, this is a powerful woman and involved in a lot of institutions. Wayne Harris, Karen Elam, Eric Kane, Willie Lightfoot, all of these people, Damon Wilson, Danielle Ponda, all these people who worked on this report, they don't have any intention of letting this report collect any cobwebs.
As Mayor Johnson said earlier, everything that we talked about could not possibly have been placed in the report, as an action, as something that we were going to focus on as a priority. Although my working group pushed, as well as other working groups pushed very specifically for all of our recommendations to be included as a priority issue. But we felt it was important that it be listed in there. And let me just talk a little bit about why we did that. One of the things that we recognize is that, through the hiring process, there are a lot of individuals that are eliminated right off the bat because of their past behavior in their youth. Now, clearly there are some, bits of behavior that should automatically disqualify an individual from serving as a police officer. Drug sales, violent crime, those kind of things. And for those specific, or for those categories of offenses, we thought, no, we were not going to recommend that even if a person engaged in that in their youth, they should still be considered for hiring. But for, juvenile stuff that, bad mistakes that we make in our youth, we didn't feel it was necessary to completely disqualify an individual from trying to serve on law enforcement. And during our conversations, I mentioned that there are some men and women on the Rochester Police Department right now that made mistakes in their past, very minor mistakes in their past, but they were significant enough that it fell into question. But based on their, growth and the way they changed the way they were living their lives, as a department, we were able to give them an opportunity and allow them to come into the ranks of the Rochester Police Department. And some of them are serving very honorably. In fact, the ones that I was referring to are all serving very honorably on the Rochester Police Department. So we didn't want to say that there were more things that we were going to use to disqualify men and women, especially men and women of color, from serving in our ranks. And we recognize that, as I said earlier, the subjectivity of some of the testing that goes in, the actual civil service test in and of itself, we found was deficient in that it did not speak to my culture or any other person of color's culture. We felt that if we're going to test people to come in and serve in the Rochester community, then we need to be inclusive of all aspects of the Rochester community and put forth a process that was fair and equitable so that they could come in and ultimately could reflect all of the demographics here. So, Daisy, I feel passionately that, the decisions that we make sometimes in our youth absolutely can come back and bite us and prevent us from being able to do things. But as we've seen in American history, they've made it a business of using some of those events and preventing us from moving further. It's the same conversation about, do I have to put on an employment application that I've been convicted of something or that I've been arrested of something. We wanted to eliminate all of those factors, or at least those which we could make recommendations to. We wanted to eliminate that so that individuals that did qualify, that were of good moral character, could come in and serve on the Rochester Police Department and the law enforcement agencies in this area. So that's a great question. I'm glad somebody asked.
I heard a part of a discussion about this yesterday on the Evan Dawson show. And what I have to remind people is it's referred to as some kind of commuter tax. But we need to understand that the largest source of revenue the city gets, one of the largest sources, if not the largest source of money that the city gets, is from sales tax revenue, which is shared by formula. In other words, the county can keep every penny of the sales tax revenue, and through arduous negotiations going back to the 80s and the 90s, to my time in office, Mayor Ryan, before that, we were able to bargain and get a significant portion of the sales tax revenue. So there's a danger that if the city went and imposed a commuter tax on suburban residents, the county could justifiably take back its sales tax revenue. So it may not be a net situation. I think that the subject needs to be carefully researched to understand what the benefits are and what the pros and cons of such a move is. It's not like we're not getting any money from county taxpayers because they pay sales taxes, and a portion of that money comes into the city. I'm not saying you couldn't get more if you had a commuter tax, but you might get less. Again, I think, Don, that question must wait until the mayor and the county executive roll out the implementation strategy. And I see a very vigorous discussion around that strategy. If people deem that it is not really adequate for the occasion, they have their staffs working on this, and at the end of this meeting, time has been set aside for both the city and the county staff to address that real question. But I think we're about 2 or 3 weeks away from understanding precisely the implementation strategy that the two principals are going to recommend to the community. So maybe you should convene a group again next month, and I'm not being facetious. We'll have more information to really talk about and understand.
So let's have a little pause in the questions and answers. Let's go to our county and city representatives. And I think Corinda was there too. So anyway, the three of you are how you decide to see how the city and county is talking about the commission report and what are different ways and means. There is a discussion that how the commission report and the priorities could be implemented. Dr. Locus, Dr. Ratzi, and I believe the Deputy Chief Corinda is there too.
So good afternoon, everybody, and thank you for this time. Dr. Candace Lucas, I'm the Chief Community Engagement Officer and played the role of the lead staff on the RASE Commission. And I believe my counterpart, Dr. Archie, is on the call as well, and would welcome Deputy County Executive Crossdale to jump in at any time. So the mayor and the county executives, as you heard, were the ones that charged this commission with the work to be done in 6 months' time. They committed to not letting this report just sit on the shelf. This was not just a passive action, but they meant for this report to be actionable. So as it was released, they have both gone through it thoroughly, and they have charged their leadership teams to also go through it. We've created a matrix that our leadership teams are using to assess each of the recommendations so that we can further prioritize them. Because this report is so vast and covers 9 sectors, we know that all of those sectors are not within the immediate authority of the mayor and the county executive to work on. But we do want to make sure that what is within their immediate authority is prioritized, and that we have the community working on the rest. There are a few things that I've heard already. One, Mayor Johnson spoke to the fact that this was meant to be a community document, and I just want to underscore that this was truly meant to be a community document. And I saw in the comments someone said that we must all hold each other accountable, and that is what we're looking to do. This is not something that should only be held by the mayor and the county executive, but by all of us if we truly intend to make these changes happen. We are looking at rolling this out and making sure that there are 4 key elements that are part of this. 1, fidelity. We want to make sure that these recommendations are implemented with fidelity, the way the community intended them to be, to the extent that they can be. We do not want to simply say, well, there's something that we're already working on that's close enough, so we'll use that. That's not the intent of this. We want this to be done with fidelity. 2, we want it to be transparent. The document is transparent, it's on the website. I know the mayor has talked about the 50 recommendations that are up front, but as you look through the entire 282 pages, there are over 200 recommendations. I do look at each of the working groups individually, and some of the parking lot items, as I've seen people say, well, why is this in the parking lot and why hasn't that risen up? Because it's in the parking lot or it didn't make it to the top 50, it does not mean that it's not something that we can work on. And we are looking at all of those. Thirdly, we want to make sure that we're being held accountable. And we need the community to do that, to help hold us accountable to making these changes. But again, not just the city and the county, but all sectors, all elements that have recommendations within this report. And I saw in the chat box questions about the health system, questions about housing. So we need the community to rally around and make sure that we're held accountable. And finally, we want to make sure that it's sustainable, that whatever is implemented as a result of these recommendations can stand the test of time. It is not just about who is the mayor at the time or who's the county executive at the time, but whoever, regardless of whoever is in that office, that these changes stay. So it is going to take a little bit of time to make sure that we can implement all of these recommendations, but please know that it is something that the mayor and the county executive are looking at immediately. And I'll just tell you a little bit about the matrix that they put forward as far as prioritizing. So 1 is to make sure that we know who the owning entity of the recommendation is. Is it the city? Is it the county? Is it a combination of both? Is it a separate sector, the business sector, the health system? So we need to know who owns it and make sure that they're brought into this conversation. We also need to know what other partners need to be involved in some of these recommendations. As we're talking about structural changes, we heard from Arlene Santiago that this goes across sectors. This can't be done in a silo. So we need to know who are the internal partners, who are the external partners that need to come to the table to work on this. We're also assessing what other resources are needed. Is this something that needs more funding? Is it something that needs more staff? Is it something that needs another table? We need to understand that as well. We're looking at the level of authority that's needed to implement some of these changes. Again, is it something that the mayor and the county executive can do immediately? Or is it something that needs legislative action? We need to go through city council. We need to go through county lev. We need to go through the state. There's some recommendations that are at the state level. There's some that may be at the federal level. So what is the level of authority that is needed? Is it a school district, school board, that type of thing? We're also looking to see whether this is an advocacy item or it's an immediate action item. And we've heard that some of these areas might be that the city and the county elected officials need to advocate on behalf of to move something forward because it's not something that they may be able to act on immediately. So we're looking at that as well. And then thinking about the time frame for implementation of a recommendation. Is this is something that we can do immediately in the short term, which would be within a year? Is it something that takes a little bit longer, so a medium term goal, maybe a year to 3 years, or is it a longer horizon for it? It's a great recommendation. We want to put it in place, but it's not something that we can do right now. So we are looking at those by the end of the month. As you've heard, we should have all of that information available for our recommendations, and we can make that more transparent to the community as well. I will pause there and turn it over to either of my colleagues, Dr. Archie or Deputy County Executive Rossdale, to add whatever I missed.
Thanks, Dr. Lucas. Dr. Archie, our County Executive, one of you.
I just wish to, go ahead, Doc, go ahead, Rossdale.
Oh, mine will be really short. I think Dr. Lucas captured just about everything. The only thing that I would have to add is there's a lot of work going on in the community now on a lot of the concerns and issues that were brought up in the report. And we're not intending to lose sight of that, but how do we build off of the work that's already been done and be the strength to continue to lift them up and move them forward?
Well said, Corinda. Just to add, I think that and I got to thank you, Dr. Lucas, for giving us a great outline of what sort of our summative next steps are. And so if there's one thing I want to add is to echo what Corinda said, which is, I think was highlighted earlier by former Mayor Johnson, who talked about how there have been reports in the past that have been established and have been developed and have been rolled out and gave us great data. But for some reason or another, the actualization of each of these things may not have come to fruition. And so a larger part of this work as well is to even look back at some of the predecessory documents and say, so why didn't this happen? Or why was this not initiated? So that we are not replicating some of the same implementation strategies or failures that may not have worked prior. And so it is a collaborative commitment that is ongoing. If you didn't hear anything that we stated today, one of the things that I want you to really take away from this conversation is the commitment that for the first time, probably in a long time, both the city and the county are equally committed to saying, we will. Just the relationship amongst ourselves throughout the Race Commission's process and how we have learned to bridge sort of gaps of communications and resources and opportunities and partnerships is that the very same diligence that we had in developing or supporting the chairs in outlining this report, that very same intentionality is essential for us going forward. As you have heard, there are components of this that is owned, isolated by the city. There are components isolated necessarily for the county. There are those areas that both the city and the county must work together to impact the largest influence of what this could be. There are things outside of the city and the county that we're going to have to partner to use and leverage our influence on the state and even larger, the federal areas to really make this happen. And so this is an unprecedented opportunity that I think will take us not just speaking about collaboration and talking about inclusion, but really getting behind the other and saying, we must change how we have operated prior to really make this work effective, sustainably going forward. And so with that, we commit to you, our community, our residents, both of the county and the city, to say that, we don't mind being held accountable. We don't mind being nudged. We don't mind being, assertively saying, we need you to do more, because at the end of the day, this isn't just your report, it's all of our report. And so having your support behind it and saying, we will bring this to reality is something essential to both sides of this equation. So we appreciate it.
Thanks, Dr. Archie. Wow, this is amazing. We have 28 more new questions and some are already there. It's amazing. I think what I'm thinking right now is to have a follow-up discussion. Nothing to be presented before these questions and other questions, and also to invite some commissioners from the other 6 groups. So all the 9 groups commissioner with the co-chair sitting there and going through these questions, answering these questions, and some new questions. So maybe in 2 weeks, give me some time that I can reach out to the other commissioners that there is a representative from each group, and we can have a very, very good discussion. This is very significant, actually. It is significant in the sense there is a role for religious leaders, social leaders, and civic leaders, as well as religious leaders. There is a role for media, and there is a role for the community as a whole. The community as a whole to be educated about the Race Commission report, so that there could be increasing awareness, and that awareness can create more consciousness in the county and the city how to proceed with the report. So that's very, very important. I think these meetings will have significant impact on our leadership in the county and the city. So we'll continue with this, and we will continue to reach out to the media to have more discussion continuing on the RACE report. Right now it is 22, maybe one more question. And then I think Bishop Singh is there. I would like to ask him to close the meeting with some prayers and concluding remarks.
Again, I would defer to the co-chairs and to the response that I believe it was Bill that had, that this is a question of what the mayor and what the mayor and the county executive in processing this, where we land on it. It's not to say, I think Marlene, you're absolutely right that this is important.
We didn't exclude anybody. This was almost a universal recommendation from each of the 9 working groups. I don't think they exempted any strata from, they said that this cultural competency training needed to be inclusive throughout both city and county government. And I think it's just, it follows that those who in leadership should be a part of that training. Now, they are the ones that usually resist. But we did have the majority leader of the Monroe County Legislature on the commission. We did have the vice president of the Rochester City Council on the commission. So I think that we would look to them to carry this message, to their membership and say it is important. The county executive and the mayor commissioned this. They should take the lead in participating in this kind of training. I think there's the opportunity. We just don't need to be bashful in pointing people in the right direction. And we had the right people involved in this process, and they didn't wash their hands of it when we turned in the report.
Yeah, and I would just jump in again. I'm sorry. Marlene, I think your point is very well taken, that I think it's a question of education and for people to understand what, as you say, exactly language access is and how that fits into the bigger picture of cultural competency. So I would also add Frank Kilfoot-Lotze was also a county legislator that is also on the commission. So Bill, I think to your point, there are a lot of people in places that can make sure this kind of stuff happens.
There is a basic flaw in our education system. Our education system, when you look deeply into it, centered around Western history. It doesn't go beyond that, like the rest of the continents do not exist. Like they have no part in human civilization. Even African-American history is not taught in the high schools, as well as, it's not really the issues which happened to the African-American community or other minorities. It's not taught in the school system. It is very recently. I think if you look into Nazareth College website, President Don Bremen and our new president, Beth Paul, you can see that the new emphasis on diversity and inclusive education and courses to be taught to the students, how to use language, how to be respectful, and what is diversity and inclusion as a whole. So the next generation of America is trained what Martin Luther King said, they would not look at my face, but rather look at my heart. If we all do that, that's what holistic education means, that how we can be with one another. So I think those changes are coming now in the education system all over, I think, in almost all colleges, which I see, especially in colleges which are, this is amazing. The SUNY colleges and universities, I don't see much of diversity. They are talking now, I saw recently, some Brockport and other areas, the SUNY school education, but mostly the private school education, like Nazareth College, University of Rochester, and others are talking about introducing new courses. So I think that is something very important. But along with that, both Monroe County and City of Rochester, all, and including the elected officials, cultural competency program and language skills are very, very significant. A week-long training for for different groups, for different employees, I think I would support that. I was talking to Wayne Harris, if we can put together some program for the police department and as well as for Monroe County also on that.
Well, let me add to the general sense of gratitude that we are all feeling in this Zoom call to all of you, Brother Bill, Sister Arlene, Brother Shafiq, and all the rest of the leaders for your deep commitment and care for our community. Let me just remind you that we stand on the shoulders of our ancestors. We stand in this land that was stewarded by the Seneca and the Mohawk and the Oneida and the Onondaga and the Keuka and the Tuscarora. And we owe it to Harriet Tubman and Susan B. Anthony and Frederick Douglass and so many others who have gone before us as to how we are stewarding our beloved community going forward. So what you are doing is a balm to the memory of our ancestors, and I hope and pray that this will actually help us make some major changes in the months and years ahead. And I want to thank you for the willingness that you've had to not only work so hard behind the scenes, but to be willing to engage the community as we learn together and change our ways going forward. So thank you, thank you, thank you. May God be with you and bless you all, and may we become more of a beloved community in the years ahead.
Thank you, everyone, and have a good day. It's nice and sunny outside to walk around and enjoy the sun. Thank you all. I appreciate it, and we will be in contact with you. Thanks.